You know, when we talk about securing our lives, we often frame it as an engineering problem.
Right, like it's entirely quantifiable.
Exactly. You buy a house, you install an alarm system, or you set up a heavy-duty firewall on your network. It's binary. You're either protected or exposed.
Yeah, safe or unsafe, locked or unlocked. And we gravitate toward that kind of quantifiable security because, well, it offers this comforting illusion of control over a fundamentally chaotic universe.
But then you step into the realm of human relationships, right? Of love and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And suddenly that engineering mindset becomes a massive liability.
Oh, absolutely.
If you try to build a perfect, impenetrable fortress to keep out the messy reality of human nature, you don't just lock the unpredictable world out. You lock yourself in.
Yeah, you engineer your own isolation. You create a vacuum.
Right.
And human nature, much like physics, abhors a vacuum. When you try to perfectly engineer a human life to avoid any possibility of pain or rejection, you end up suffocating the very life you are trying to preserve.
The pressure inside just has to break eventually.
Precisely. It always finds a way out.
Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. You, listening right now, are joining us as our third partner in this journey of intellectual discovery.
Glad to have you with us.
Today, our mission is to unpack a literal masterpiece from the year 1613, written by a man who arguably mapped the architecture of the human soul better than almost anyone else in history. I'm talking about Miguel de Cervantes.
Yeah, the author of Don Quixote.
Right. But today we're looking at a story called El Celoso Extremeño, or The Jealous Extreme Maduran, which is from his famous collection, the Novellas Ejemplares.
And we are pulling from a really rich stack of sources for this deep dive. We have the full transcripts of the original text, detailed historical context regarding 17th century Spain, and some incredibly sharp literary critiques that analyze the text from a modern philosophical perspective.
Yeah, and here's the hook. When we think of the ultimate chronicler of human passions, the mind usually darts straight to the British Isles. Right? Like Shakespeare mapping out jealousy in Othello or ambition in Macbeth.
Sure, he's the go-to.
But Cervantes accomplishes something staggeringly similar for Spanish literature here. He delves into the psychology of both men and women with an absolute scalpel. So we're not just recounting a 400-year-old story today.
No, definitely not.
We're treating this as a profound philosophical exploration of control, the anatomy of paranoia, and, well, the ultimate illusion of human authority over nature.
Because what Cervantes does so brilliantly here is take a standard, almost cliche plot setup of his era, you know, the ancient jealous husband and the young beautiful wife, and he completely subverts it.
He flips it entirely.
Right. He transforms a common comedic trope into a devastating psychological tragedy. It really forces us to examine our own modern methods of trying to control the uncontrollable.
So let's jump in. We start with our protagonist, a man named Filippo de Carrizales.
Okay.
He's an Extremadura's hidalgo, a nobleman, but in his early life, he's not exactly the picture of aristocratic dignity. He's basically a prodigal son.
Yeah, to put it mildly.
He squanders his youth and his considerable family wealth traveling all over Spain, Italy, and Flanders, just burning through cash, living the high life.
Right. He's a man deeply immersed in the chaotic, vibrant, and often treacherous currents of 16th century European life. He isn't sheltered at all.
Not even a little bit.
He knows exactly what humans are capable of because he spent decades right there in the mud with them. He understands deceit, ambition, betrayal on a molecular level because he likely participated in all of it.
Yeah, he's seen the worst of humanity. But by the time he hits age 48, the music stops. His parents are dead, his inheritance is completely evaporated, and he finds himself utterly destitute in the port city of Seville.
Which was a massive, bustling hub at the time.
Exactly. But he has no money, his friends have vanished, and he's staring down a very bleak, impoverished future. So he takes the ultimate escape hatch of the era. He heads to the Americas.
The Indies.
Right. The text refers to going to the Indies, which for Carrizales meant sailing to Peru.
And we really need to pause here and examine how Cervantes describes the Indies in this context, because it forms the psychological bedrock of everything Carrizales does later.
The description of the sources is wild.
It really is. It features this incredible rolling description. It calls the Indies the refuge and shelter of the desperate of Spain, church of the rebels, safe conduct of homicides, shovel and cover of gamblers.
Wow.
General lure of free women, common deceit of many, and particular remedy of few.
So it essentially functioned like a 16th century offshore tax haven and penal colony combined.
Exactly.
Like a place where the rules of polite European society were totally suspended.
Precisely. It was the ultimate frontier of lawlessness and desperation. Carrizales isn't going there as some, noble, wide-eyed explorer looking to discover new plans. He is a desperate man throwing himself into a shark tank of other desperate men.
Right.
If you spend 20 years in an environment like that, a literal sanctuary for murderers and swindlers, it's going to fundamentally rewire your brain.
How could it not?
You survive in a place like that by existing in a state of hypervigilance. You trust absolutely no one. You anticipate the knife in your back at every turn.
And he does survive. In fact, he thrives. Over 20 years in Peru, through relentless industry and, let's be honest, probably a fair amount of ruthlessness, he amasses a staggering fortune.
Massive hoard.
Yeah, the sources say he accumulates over 150,000 pesos of gold and silver. To put that in perspective, that is lottery winner, tech billionaire level wealth for the time. He wins the ultimate game of survival in the most dangerous casino on earth.
So at age 68, he decides to cash out his chips.
Right. He packs up literal bars of gold and silver and sails back across the Atlantic. He arrives back in Seville as an old man, phenomenally rich, looking to finally settle down and enjoy the safety he's purchased.
But this is where the mechanism of his mind becomes absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, because you'd assume he would be thrilled. He's secured his existence. But instead, he is plagued by intense, suffocating anxiety.
This reveals the core epistemology of his anxiety. Cervantes is making a brilliant philosophical observation about the nature of wealth and worry.
Break that down for us.
Well, when Carrizales was poor, he couldn't sleep because he was agonizing over his survival. He was tossed around by the immediate visceral panic of having nothing. Now he's surrounded by immense wealth and he still cannot sleep.
Wow.
The accumulation of material wealth didn't erase his suffering, it merely changed the flavor of it.
He even explicitly notes that wealth is as heavy a burden to those unaccustomed to it as poverty is. Like he looks at his gold bars and realizes they aren't just currency. They're a beacon for thieves, a temptation for the greedy.
Right. When he had nothing to lose. Now he has everything to lose, and it terrifies him.
It perfectly aligns with Stoic philosophy, right? Like thinkers like Seneca or Epictetus.
Oh, absolutely. The Stoics argued that external goods, wealth, status, property do not actually generate internal tranquility.
They usually generate more fear.
Exactly, because you've acquired an external dependency that can be taken away from you by fortune or by other people. Carrizales is trapped in this exact paradox. He wants to live out his old age in peace in his homeland. But he knows his homeland is poor.
So if he goes back to his Pacific village,
he'll just be a massive target for endless requests for loans, favors, and handouts. His success has fundamentally isolated him.
and he's further isolated by his own biology. He's 68. He wants to marry because he wants an heir to leave this massive fortune to. It's a very deeply ingrained human desire for continuity,
Yeah.
To feel like your life's work isn't going to vanish the moment you die.
Sure, it's very relatable.
But there is a massive psychological roadblock. The text states that he is, by his very nature, the most jealous man in the world. Just the hypothetical thought of being a husband paralyzes him with suspicion.
He's projecting his vast, cynical experience of human deceit onto an unknown future. Because he knows how the world operates. Remember his wild youth? Remember his 20 years among the cutthroats in the Indies? He's fundamentally convinced that any woman he marries will inevitably betray him.
It's his baseline.
Right. His jealousy isn't just a fleeting emotion. It's his core operating system. It's the lens through which he processes all of human interaction.
So he makes a firm decision. He says, I'm not getting married. The risk profile is too high. But then he's walking down the street one day, happens to look up, and sees a young girl at a window. Her name is Leonora. She's only 13 or 14 years old.
Barely a teenager.
Yeah. She comes from a noble family, but they are completely impoverished. And Carrizales is instantly struck by her beauty. He's utterly captivated.
But notice the mechanism of his attraction here. It isn't romantic in any traditional poetic sense.
No, not at all.
He doesn't start writing sonnets. His mind immediately shifts into a deeply calculated risk assessment. He engages in this internal monologue that perfectly outlines his worldview.
And his rationale is chilling. He looks at her and thinks, okay, she's beautiful, but she's poor, meaning her family won't have the power to challenge me. More importantly, she's young. Her youth is what can neutralize his suspicions.
Right. She's unformed.
He literally says to himself, I will marry her, I will lock her up, and I will mold her to my ways. The Spanish phrase is "haré a mis mañas." He declares she will have no other condition than the one I teach her.
That phrase, mold her to my ways, is the crux of the philosophical horror here. He is completely erasing her personhood before he even meets her.
Yeah, she's a blank slate to him.
He doesn't view Leonora as a partner, a companion, or an autonomous human being. He views her as raw material. She is a piece of human capital that he believes he can acquire, isolate from all outside variables, and program like a machine to serve his own need for absolute security.
Wait, I have to ask, is he even looking for a wife here?
Yeah.
Because it sounds exactly like a modern tech billionaire who realizes the world is unstable, so he decides to build a self-sustaining apocalyptic bunker in New Zealand.
That is a perfect analogy. Like, he thinks his 150,000 pesos can literally purchase immunity from human vulnerability. He gives her parents a massive dowry of 20,000 ducats. He essentially buys her off them. Can love even exist when one person views the other merely as a controllable asset? If we define love as something that requires mutual vulnerability and reciprocal recognition of the other's humanity, then no, absolutely not.
He's allergic to vulnerability.
Carrizales is structuring this entire arrangement specifically to eliminate his own vulnerability. He's seeking a perfectly controlled environment where his paranoia can finally rest. He operates on the assumption that because she's young and inexperienced, her mind is a tabula rasa, a blank slate upon which he can simply write the code for the perfect, flawlessly faithful wife.
And his paranoia kicks into overdrive before they even live together. The sources point out his very first act of jealousy. He refuses to let a local tailor take Leonora's measurements for her new wedding clothes.
It's so extreme. Even the purely professional gaze of a tradesman is perceived as an intolerable threat to his absolute ownership.
So what does he do? He finds a poor woman in the city with a vaguely similar body type, has the tailor measure her, makes a single test dress, tries it on Leonora, and then orders an entire luxurious wardrobe based on that proxy measurement.
A proxy measurement, it's absurd.
He showers Leonora and her parents with unimaginable wealth. The parents are overjoyed. They think they've secured a miracle. Leonora is just bewildered, having spent her whole life in simple, threadbare clothes. But Carrizales refuses to move her into his home until he has finished constructing the perfect habitat.
Which brings us to the architectural manifestation of his paranoia. He isn't just renovating a house, he's building a philosophical construct. He's turning his psychological state into physical reality.
And the details of this house are staggering. He buys a property in a prime neighborhood in Seville for 12,000 ducats. It's a massive mansion, complete with running water and a garden full of orange trees.
Sounds lovely on paper.
Right, but then he brings in the masons. He takes every single window that faces the street, and he completely walls them up. He alters the architecture so that if you're inside the house, the only way you can look out is by craning your neck and looking straight up at the sky.
Think about the psychological impact of that. He is literally severing the house's horizontal connection to humanity.
Yeah.
By forcing their gaze only upward to the sky, he's attempting to create an environment entirely divorced from the earthly, flawed, and unpredictable world of human interaction.
I really want you, the listener, to imagine this. Think back to how isolating and claustrophobic modern pandemic lockdowns felt when you were cut off from society. Now imagine you're a 14-year-old girl, and that lockdown is permanent.
It's horrifying.
Your entire visual world is reduced to whatever happens to pass directly overhead. It's an act of profound sensory deprivation.
And he extends this deprivation to biology itself. He institutes a strict ban on any male presence on the premises. Not just human males, he bans male animals.
That part is just...
Right. Not a male dog to bark at the door. Not a male cat to chase mice in the pantry. Everything inside those walls, down to the pets, must be biologically female.
It's completely absurd. It highlights a terror, not just of men, but of masculinity, of the male principle in nature. He's literally trying to edit the laws of biology.
It's hubris on a massive scale.
It's like trying to hermetically seal a room to keep out oxygen because you're afraid the furniture might rust.
Yeah.
Eventually, the people inside that room are going to suffocate. You cannot banish nature.
You can't, but he certainly tries. His human security system is just as intense. To guard the outermost door, he employs an old black eunuch named Loaisa.
A eunuch?
Yeah, choosing a eunuch is a deliberate, highly symbolic attempt to place a biologically neutralized guard at the threshold between his pristine inner world and the corrupt outside world.
And inside the house.
Inside, he buys 4 white female slaves. And the text specifically mentions they are branded on their faces, highlighting their status as absolute property. He buys 2 black female slaves. And he hires a strict older woman, a dueña named Maria Alonso, to be the chaperone, the superintendent, the moral enforcer of the house.
And what becomes of Leonora in all this? Her life becomes an absolute void. She is kept in total isolation. The only time she's permitted to leave the fortress is to attend Mass.
And even that is orchestrated with military precision.
Exactly. They leave the house at the crack of dawn, before the sun has even broken the horizon. This ensures she can't see the vibrant life of the streets in the daylight, and more importantly, the streets can't see her. She goes to church, her parents are allowed to speak to her there under the watchful eye of her husband, and then she's whisked immediately back to the vacuum.
This is what some critics call the inferno of silence. Carrizales genuinely believes he is creating an Eden, a sinless paradise for his young bride. He surrounds her with luxurious tapestries, which of course only depict female figures and serene landscapes. He showers her with sweets, trinkets, and gifts. He believes that if he provides infinite material comfort and removes all temptation, he has solved the human equation. But philosophically, he hasn't created a paradise. He's created a prison.
Because he operates on the assumption that if you physically remove the opportunity for sin, you guarantee virtue.
And that assumption breaks down the minute you apply any serious ethical framework to it. Let's look at Kantian ethics, for example. Immanuel Kant argued that true moral worth requires agency.
Right, the ability to choose.
Exactly. If a robot is programmed to save a drowning child, the robot isn't acting virtuously, it's just executing code. Virtue requires the freedom to make the wrong choice. If Leonora is only faithful because she is walled in, constantly monitored by branded slaves and a strict chaperone, and literally has 0 physical opportunity to interact with another man, is she actually a faithful wife? Or does she merely suffer from a lack of options?
That makes perfect sense. Like if you put someone in a straitjacket, you don't get to praise them for their peaceful temperament. They physically cannot throw a punch.
Exactly. Carrizales is enforcing a mechanical fidelity, an architectural fidelity, not a moral one. And the tragic irony is that he's incredibly smug about it.
He thinks he's won.
He goes about his day, doing his minor business in the city, returning quickly, locking the massive double doors behind him, thoroughly convinced that neither human cunning nor malice can disturb his engineered peace. He sleeps with the master key under his pillow or sometimes tucked directly under his own body. He thinks he has outsmarted the human condition.
But he made a fundamental engineering error. He built an impenetrable, sky-high wall against the outside world. He prepared for a frontal assault. But he forgot that the most destructive forces in nature don't always try to break the wall down with a battering ram. Sometimes they just find a microscopic crack and seep through.
Which brings us to the infiltration of art and the awakening of appetite.
Yes. This is where Cervantes' sharp sociological eye comes into play. You have this massive, silent, windowless fortress sitting right in the middle of a bustling, chaotic city like Seville.
Yeah.
It's an anomaly. And human nature dictates that an anomaly will inevitably attract curiosity.
Enter Loaisa. The sources describe him as a birote. This was a very specific social archetype in 17th century Seville. He's a young, idle, elegant bachelor.
And it's crucial to understand that Loaisa isn't a hardened criminal. He's not some evil mastermind with a vendetta against Carrizales.
No, not at all. He's just a wealthy guy with way too much free time floating around the city looking for amusement. He notices this house, always locked, always completely silent. He asks around, discovers the backstory of the rich, ancient, jealous man and the beautiful teenage wife locked inside, and suddenly he has found his new project.
For a man like Loaisa, the fortress is not a deterrent. It's a provocation.
It's the ultimate puzzle. Loaisa perfectly represents the chaotic, vibrant, unpredictable energy of the outside world that Carrizales spent a fortune trying to suppress. Carrizales views security as a static state of being. Loaisa views it as a game to be beaten.
And Loaisa's strategy to beat the game is brilliantly simple. He doesn't try to climb the walls or bribe the guards with gold. He disappears from his usual elite social circles. He shaves off part of his beard to alter his face. He slaps a patch over one eye. He binds up one of his legs tightly and grabs a pair of wooden crutches.
Full transformation.
He dresses himself in rags so filthy and tattered that the text notes no genuine beggar in the city looked more wretched. But his most important tool isn't a lockpick. It's a small, greasy, slightly out-of-tune guitar.
He transforms himself into the lowest, most unthreatening figure imaginable, a crippled, singing vagrant. This disguise is a psychological masterstroke because it completely bypasses Carrizales' threat matrix.
He's invisible to him.
Exactly. Carrizales is looking for a handsome young nobleman in silk doublets. He isn't looking for a crippled beggar playing a terrible guitar. Loaisa essentially cloaks himself in misery to become invisible to the security system.
So Loaisa sets up camp at night outside the outer door of the house. He knows that Luis, the old black eunuch, is locked in the space between the outer street door and the inner courtyard door. And he also knows, as the text emphasizes, the deep cultural affinity Luis has for music.
Right.
So Luis starts playing his greasy guitar. He sings catchy, popular ballads of the day, and Luis, trapped alone in the dark between two heavy doors, is instantly captivated. He presses his ear against the cold wood, desperate to absorb the sound.
We have to analyze the role of art here. Art and music function as an uncontrollable, permeating force. Carrizales could raise his masonry walls to the sky, he could double-lock the solid oak doors, he could banish men and dogs, but he could not block sound waves.
Sound gets in everywhere.
Art, in Cervantes' narrative, is the ultimate subversive element. It bypasses physical barriers and appeals directly to the soul's innate desire for connection and beauty.
And Loaisa realizes he has Luis on the hook. He strikes up a conversation through the thick wood of the door. He plays his part, claiming he's a poor cripple who makes his meager living teaching music to slaves, boasting that some of his students now play in the best taverns in the city.
And Luis is dying to learn.
Loaisa says, "I could teach you the basics in 15 days if I could just get inside." Luis laments that it's entirely impossible. His master takes the master keys into his bed every single night.
And this is where Luis's manipulation shifts from psychological to practical. He doesn't ask Luis to steal the keys, he proposes a technical workaround.
What does he tell him?
He tells Luis to scrape away a little bit of the dirt and mortar under the heavy doorframe. Through that tiny gap, Loaisa slides in a pair of pincers and a small hammer. He instructs Luis to pry the nails out of the metal lock plate from the inside, let him in, and then they can simply tap the lock back into place so perfectly that the paranoid Carrizales will never notice it was tampered with.
It's a classic inside job, facilitated entirely by a sudden, intense desire for art. Luis, driven by his newfound passion for the guitar, physically dismantles the multi-thousand ducat security system from within. He pulls the nails, pushes the door open, and in hops Loaisa.
And the moment he's inside, Loaisa drops his crutches, pulls out a massive skin of strong wine, and starts doing physical acrobatics, revealing to Luis that he is not crippled at all.
Luis is stunned, but the trap has already closed. He is now complicit. They put the lock back together, and Loaisa begins his lessons in Luis's quarters. Of course, Loaisa is just getting Luis drunk and making him believe he's learning the instrument. But Loaisa doesn't care about Luis. The eunuch was just the firewall he had to bypass. The real target is the women trapped inside the inner courtyard.
Exactly. The next day, after Carrizales locks the inner doors and leaves for his errands in the city, Luis, still buzzing from the wine and the excitement of the music, grabs the guitar and starts violently strumming it.
And the women hear it.
The women inside the house hear the noise through the inner torno. For context, a torno is a revolving serving hatch, commonly used in strict convents, designed to pass food or items through a wall without the people on either side ever seeing each other.
Right.
The women hear this noise and rush to the hatch. They're stunned. They ask Luis where on earth he got a guitar. Luis, bragging, says the greatest musician in the world is currently living in his quarters teaching him.
And we have to remember the state of these women. They are starving for stimulus. They've been living in a sensory deprivation tank for an entire year. One of the slaves literally cries out, "Since we've been locked in here, we haven't even heard the song of the birds."
It's so sad. They're desperate for anything new, anything alive, anything that isn't the suffocating silence of Carrizales' paranoia.
So they beg Luis to let them hear this mysterious master musician. That night, after Carrizales is fast asleep, all the women, the branded slaves, the maids, and even the supposedly strict Duane Marie Alonso gather around the revolving hatch. Luisa plays the guitar, and he plays it beautifully.
He plays the newest, most popular dances of the outside world, like the saraband.
He sings. The women are completely entranced. They're so desperate to see him that they actually drill a tiny hole in the wood of the hatch just to peek through. And what do they see? Not a crippled beggar, but a handsome, elegant young man in fine clothes. To them, isolated in their dark, silent world, he looks like an angel descended directly from heaven.
There is a highly specific moment here that requires deep philosophical unpacking. Later on, when the women finally get Loaisa inside their space, the Dueña Marie Alonso sings a popular song while the other women dance. The lyrics of this song are the philosophical key to the entire story.
What are the lyrics?
The song goes, Madre la mi madre, guardas me ponéis, que si yo no me guardo, no me guardaréis. Mother, my mother, you place guards upon me, but if I do not guard myself, you cannot guard me. And then the song explicitly states, C'est la privación causa de apetito. Privation is the cause of appetite.
That is such a lethal concept to Carrizales' entire worldview. By making the outside world perfectly forbidden, he made it perfectly irresistible.
It perfectly illustrates the psychological principle of reactance. Reactance occurs when a person feels that their freedom to choose an action is being threatened or eliminated. Their brain responds by intensely magnifying the desire for that specific forbidden freedom.
So his walls didn't kill their desire.
No, Carrizales believed his massive walls were starving their desires by removing visual temptation. Instead, the walls acted like a magnifying glass in the sun, focusing their vague desires until they caught fire.
Think about how censorship almost always backfires in our own society, right? You ban a controversial book from a library, and overnight, every teenager in the district wants to read it.
Exactly.
You tell a kid they absolutely cannot hang out with a specific person, and that person becomes instantly intoxicating. Carrizales engineered a massive psychological pressure cooker, and Loaisa. Loaisa wasn't an evil genius planting dynamite on the dam. He was just a trickle of water that found a tiny crack. The immense, unnatural pressure inside the dam did all the actual destructive work.
That is a brilliant analogy. The music was merely the moisture seeping through the masonry. The true destructive force was the profound, unnatural deprivation that Carrizales had imposed upon the household.
So the women are completely hooked. They're addicted to the music, the excitement, the danger. They want Loaisa inside the inner sanctum. But there's a massive logistical problem. The inner door is locked, and Carrizales sleeps with the master key under his body.
A tough barrier.
Yeah, but Loaisa, who seems prepared for absolutely everything, tells them through the hatch that he can provide a powerful sleeping ointment. He claims that if they rub it on the old man, he will sleep like a corpse, and they can easily slide the key out from under him. The women are ecstatic. They view this ointment as a miraculous gift.
And this leads us to the critical threshold of the story.
Yeah.
The collapse of the engineered system. The plan is set in motion. The psychological dynamics that unfold in this sequence are incredibly complex and demand scrutiny.
Right. So the following night, Loaisa gets the sleeping ointment from his friends on the outside and passes it through the revolving hatch. Now, Leonora, the 14-year-old wife, has been hesitant up to this point. She initially didn't even want to see the musician, fearing for her honor and terrified of her husband.
Understandably so.
But the other women, and especially the Dueña Maria Alonso, relentlessly pressure her. They frame it as harmless fun, just a little music to break up the crushing monotony of their lives. So Leonora takes the ointment.
Picture the tension in this scene. It's masterfully constructed. Leonora, a terrified teenager, creeps up to the bed of her husband. She's been instructed to anoint his pulses, his temples, and his nostrils. As she gently touches his nose with the ointment, the old man shudders in his sleep.
Oh, man.
She freezes. She thinks she's been caught and nearly dies of fright on the spot. But the ointment is potent. He settles back down and falls into a heavy, deep, snoring sleep.
Cervantes describes the sound of his snoring as music to her ears. She shakes him gently. Nothing. She physically turns him over in the bed. Nothing. He is out cold. She reaches her hand under the mattress right beneath his body and pulls out the master key.
It's a huge moment.
It's a moment of total victory over the system. She runs to the door, hands the key to the dueña, and tells her to let the musician inside. But even at this moment of rebellion, Leonora tries to maintain some semblance of control. She insists that before Loaisa is allowed to step foot inside, he must swear a solemn oath not to do anything that they do not explicitly order him to do.
And Loaisa, who is essentially treating this whole scenario as a grand theatrical game, swears a hilariously elaborate, nonsensical oath. He swears by the intemperate efficacy, by the ins and outs of Mount Lebanon, by the history of Charlemagne, and by the death of the giant Fierabras.
It's just a salad of words.
It's a complete parody of a solemn chivalric vow, but the women, isolated from the world and entirely naive to the cynical humor of a Seville street bachelor, are deeply impressed by his eloquent words. They drag him inside. The fortress has officially been breached. The Trojan horse is standing in the middle of the courtyard.
They bring him into a grand sitting room, and the scene becomes almost surreal. The women surround him, examining him like he's a rare, exotic animal that has wandered into their enclosure. They're praising his hair, his teeth, his eyes. Leonora remains quiet, but internally, she's comparing this vibrant young man to her ancient paranoid husband, and Loaisa is clearly winning that comparison.
Of course he is.
They hand her the guitar, he plays, they sing that song about privation causing appetite, and they dance. For a brief moment, it's a scene of pure, forbidden joy and release.
But the release is incredibly fragile. Suddenly, Guiomar, one of the branded slaves who is left in the courtyard to keep watch, comes sprinting into the room, absolutely terrified. She claims Carrizales has woken up from the ointment and is currently wandering the house.
Panic.
Absolute panic ensues. Cervantes describes the women scattering like a flock of pigeons at the sudden sound of a gunshot. Everyone dives for cover in different rooms.
It turns out to be a false alarm, though. The slave was just paranoid. The old man is still snoring away in his bed. However, this sudden disruption fundamentally changes the dynamic of the night. The dueña, Maria Alonso, uses the chaos to usher Loaisa into her own private room to hide.
And here is where we must deeply analyze Maria Alonso's role in this tragedy.
Yeah, let's get into her.
She was the one person specifically selected and hired by Carrizales for her supposed gravity, prudence, and moral fortitude. She was meant to be the internal guard dog.
But she's not.
No, Maria Alonso is the true internal rot of the house. She represents the internal corruption of human nature. Carrizales spent all of his vast fortune and energy building massive walls to keep external threats out, but he completely failed to realize that human nature is corruptible from within.
That's the real threat.
Once she has the handsome young Loaisa alone in her room, the supposed moral guardian drops all pretense. She tries to seduce him herself. She demands that he sleep with her before she'll lift a finger to help him get to Leonora.
It is so incredibly cynical. Loaisa is deeply repulsed by her, but he's a manipulator at heart, so he plays along. He promises her absolutely whatever she wants, provided she just goes and gets Leonora to yield to him first. So Maria Alonso goes to find Leonora.
And she delivers a rhetorically brilliant, devastatingly persuasive speech to the young girl. She weaponizes her authority as the trusted dueña.
She paints a vivid picture of the physical delights of a young, virile lover compared to the cold reality of an old, decaying husband. She promises absolute secrecy, assuring Leonora that her honor will remain completely intact because no one will ever know. She relentlessly wears down the exhausted, confused teenager's defenses.
Cervantes describes Maria Alonso's words as being full of rhetorical colors and linguistic deviltries. She's the literal serpent in this twisted, windowless Eden. This brings us to a profound philosophical debate about agency and determinism. Carrizales believed he could determine Leonora's behavior by strictly controlling her physical environment. But Maria Alonso proves that influence is psychological. She corrupts Leonora's mind, rendering the physical walls of the house entirely irrelevant. The breach wasn't just physical, it was ideological.
The text delivers this gut punch of a line. Leonora yielded, Leonora was deceived, and Leonora was lost. Maria Alonso practically drags the crying, overwhelmed girl into the room with Loaisa, physically locks the door behind them, and leaves them alone in the dark.
In that moment, Carrizales' entire life's work, his 150,000 pesos, his ingenious architecture, his eunuch, his locks, it is all utterly destroyed by the desires of a young man and the corruption of an old chaperone.
It's all gone.
But here is where Cervantes executes a structural masterstroke that elevates the story from a common tragedy to a philosophical masterpiece. This is the pivot on which the entire weight of the narrative rests. We, the readers, are led to believe that the inevitable has happened. The naive young wife, locked in a dark bedroom with a charming, persistent seducer after being worn down by her most trusted guardian. The conclusion seems foregone.
Right, but we have to fast forward through the night to the moment of truth. Against all odds, despite her youth, her simplicity, the overwhelming psychological pressure from the dueña, and the highly romanticized setting, Leonora miraculously resists his final advances.
It's a huge twist.
She fights him off, she argues with him, she pleads with him, and she physically resists him until Loaisa is simply exhausted. Eventually, they both just fall asleep in each other's arms, fully closed, without having committed the ultimate physical act of betrayal.
This is a monumental shift. This single act of resistance shatters everything Carrizales believed about the world. He believed her virtue was entirely dependent on his physical walls. He believed that if the walls fell, her virtue would automatically fall because humans have no internal restraint.
That mechanistic view again.
Right. It's a purely mechanistic view of morality. But Leonora, in the dark, completely isolated from her husband's oversight, under immense pressure from her peers, discovers her own internal moral compass. She maintains her agency at the ultimate moment of truth.
No, wait a minute. I need to push back on this pretty hard.
Okay, go ahead.
Are we absolutely sure this is a triumph of a deep internal moral compass? Or was she just an exhausted, terrified 14-year-old kid who got cold feet at the last second and fell asleep? Because let's be honest, just a few hours earlier, she was perfectly willing to rub a mysterious, potentially lethal chemical compound on her elderly husband's face just to steal his keys. Is she really a paragon of Kantian virtue here, or did the situation just fizzle out?
That is a completely valid challenge, and it's the central ambiguity that critics have debated for centuries. Was her resistance born of profound moral clarity or just physical exhaustion and fear? But from a philosophical standpoint, the why almost matters less than the what. The fact remains that in the absence of external control, she made a choice. Carrizales trusted the bricks and the mortar, but he didn't trust her soul. And in the end, when the bricks and mortar had completely failed, it was only her soul, however confused or exhausted it was, that provided any actual defense.
I see.
It proves that internal conviction, or even just internal hesitation, is a stronger barrier than a physical wall. You cannot engineer virtue. It must be enacted by the individual.
Okay, that makes sense. The engineered system failed, but the unpredictable human element held the line, even if clumsily. But unfortunately, Carrizales has absolutely no idea that she resisted, because this brings us to what we'll call the tragedy of the silkworm.
A very apt name.
Morning approaches. The effects of the ointment finally begin to wear off. Carrizales wakes up in his bed. He reaches out for his young wife. She's not there. He reaches under his body for the master key. It's gone. Panic sets in. He creeps silently through the silent house, and eventually he finds his wife fast asleep in the arms of the young musician in the dueña's room.
Now, we have to contextualize this moment within 17th century Spanish literature and society. There's a very rigid, standard trope for this exact scenario. It's the honor killing.
Right.
According to the societal codes of the time, a husband who discovers such a betrayal is expected to fly into a righteous rage and murder them both to cleanse his stained honor with their blood. Famous playwrights of the era, like Calderón de la Barca, built entire careers out of these bloody, vengeful, dramatically satisfying resolutions. The 17th century audience reading this would be fully bracing themselves for Carrizales to draw his dagger and start slashing.
And he actually considers it. He goes back to his bedroom, he retrieves his dagger, he walks back to the room where they are sleeping, fully intending to murder them both.
Yeah.
But he cannot do it. He's physically paralyzed by his grief. The pain of the betrayal literally suffocates his physical strength. He drops the dagger and collapses to the floor in a deep swoon.
It's a deeply pathetic moment.
When he finally regains consciousness, Leonora and the dueña have discovered him. He doesn't strike them. He simply asks them to send for Leonora's parents immediately.
When the parents arrive at the house, expecting perhaps to celebrate some news, Carrizales sits them down. He's holding his weeping, terrified wife's hand. And he delivers one of the most heartbreaking, shocking, and philosophically dense monologues in all of literature. He does not scream. He does not demand vengeance against Loaisa. He doesn't even really blame Leonora. He blames himself.
He lays out his entire methodology to them. He recounts the walls he built, the double locks, the eunuch, the massive wealth he bestowed upon them. And then he says, and this is the absolute core of our deep dive today, he says, "I was the silkworm that built its own prison and died in it." He recognizes his massive, fatal hubris.
Let's spend some significant time analyzing that silkworm metaphor because it explains the exact mechanism of his downfall. It isn't just poetry, it's a precise description of his psychology.
Think about how a silkworm operates.
Right, it secretes the silk from its own body to spin a cocoon, perfectly enclosing and protecting itself from the outside world. But to harvest that silk, the farmer must boil the cocoon, inevitably killing the worm trapped inside.
Wow.
Carrizales realizes that he spun a massive web of wealth, anxiety, and literal stone walls out of his own psychological material, his own paranoia, and his own jealousy. He secreted this impenetrable fortress from his own damaged psyche, and ultimately it suffocated him.
He realizes that he tried to play God. He says to the parents, "How could I think that the 15 years of this girl could be compatible with my nearly 80? He tried to control nature. He tried to freeze time, to halt biology, to bend another human soul to his absolute will, and the universe or human nature punished him for his staggering arrogance."
This is Cervantes elevating the material. He takes a standard, almost comedic trope of the jealous old man who gets tricked by the clever young lover, and he infuses it with profound self-awareness.
Like King Lear.
Exactly like King Lear. He achieves a moment of pure tragic clarity. He recognizes that his suffering isn't caused by the malicious outside world. It's caused by his own fundamentally flawed philosophy of life. He placed all his faith in human engineering and locks and walls rather than trusting in divine providence or in the inherent risky goodness of another human being.
It's the ultimate tragedy of the punishment perfectly fitting the crime. He didn't die by an assassin's blade in the jungles of Peru. He didn't die in a duel over his honor in the streets of Seville. He's dying from the realization that his entire approach to existence, his fundamental operating system, was a catastrophic failure. His heart simply breaks under the crushing weight of his own hubris.
And we can see the brilliance of this specific ending by contrasting it with an earlier draft of the story.
Right, there's another version.
There's a manuscript known as the Porras de la Cámara version, which predates the published Novellas Exemplares. In that earlier version, the characters are named Isabella and Filippo. And in that draft, the wife actually does commit adultery with the young man. Yes. The story is much more direct, much less ambiguous, and ultimately less nuanced. It's a simple, straightforward, cautionary tale about a bad wife and a foolish husband. But in the final published version, Cervantes changes it. By having Leonora resist the physical act and by having Carrizales take the philosophical blame upon himself, he transforms the narrative. It's no longer a story about adultery. It's a profound meditation on the limits of human control.
So, lying on his deathbed, surrounded by his weeping wife and her parents, he calls for a notary. He rewrites his will, and his final act is breathtaking in its complete subversion of expectations. He doubles Leonora's already massive dowry, and he explicitly tells her parents that after he dies, he wants her to marry the young man she was found with.
It's a stunning act of grace.
He realizes they are closer in age, closer in nature, and he wants to provide for her happiness. He leaves generous amounts of money to the servants, he officially frees the slaves, and he leaves a fortune to her parents. The only person he cuts out of the will entirely is the corrupt dueña, Maria Alonso. And then 7 days later, consumed by sorrow, he dies.
It's his ultimate act of atonement. He tries, in his final dying moments, to completely dismantle the prison he built. He tries to use his wealth not to control Leonora, but to give her the freedom and the appropriate life he had stolen from her.
But the story doesn't end there. There's a final twist, and it centers entirely on the concept of true freedom. During Carrizales' deathbed speech, Leonora is physically unable to speak. She tries desperately to defend her innocence, to tell him that she didn't actually sleep with Loaisa, that she fought him off.
But she can't get the words out.
No, she's so overcome with shock, fear, and grief that her tongue is literally tied. She keeps fainting. So Carrizales dies believing she was unfaithful, even though he forgives her for it.
This silence is deeply tragic, but it perfectly sets up the final, most important philosophical act of the story. Carrizales is dead. Leonora is now a very wealthy widow. According to the societal norms of the time, and endowed with her husband's own dying blessing, she's entirely free to marry Loaisa.
And Loaisa is waiting eagerly in the wings. He expects to marry a rich, beautiful young widow and live happily ever after. But within a week of her husband's funeral, in a twist that shocks everyone in the city, Leonora refuses Loaisa. Instead, she enters one of the strictest, most secluded convents in Seville. She becomes a cloistered nun.
Leaving Loaisa completely dumbfounded.
Right. Loaisa is deeply frustrated and humiliated. He packs up his things and sails off to the Indies to seek his own fortune, just as Carrizales did decades earlier. The Dueña Maria Alonso is left poor, abandoned, and disgraced.
The crucial question we must ask is, why did Leonora choose the convent? The sources often suggest a neat little moral derived from this ending. He who loves with fear ends up building prisons, and he who lives locked up ends up looking for windows. But there's a much deeper philosophical layer here regarding agency and autonomy.
I have to admit, I find her choice intensely ironic.
Yeah.
She was forced into a walled fortress by her paranoid husband, and as soon as she finally gets her freedom, she freely chooses to walk right into another walled enclosure and lock the door behind her. What's the difference? Isn't she just trading one cell for another?
Visually, perhaps, but philosophically, the difference is absolute. The difference is the presence of free will. Entering the convent was Leonora's first act of true autonomous freedom in her entire life. Think about her trajectory. Throughout the story, she was treated as a pawn. Her parents treated her as a financial asset to be traded for a dowry.
Yeah.
Carrizales treated her as raw material to be molded into a security blanket. Maria Alonso treated her as a tool to gain favor with Loaisa. Loaisa treated her as a conquest, a puzzle to be solved. Everyone in her life had a design for her.
So by choosing the convent, she's radically rejecting all of their designs. She rejects the suffocating life Carrizales has engineered for her, and she rejects the life of chaotic, unpredictable passion that Loaisa represented.
Precisely. A prison is an enclosure imposed upon you against your will by an external force. A sanctuary is an enclosure you freely choose for yourself in order to find peace. By choosing her own enclosure, on her own terms, she finally asserts her personhood.
She takes control.
She removes herself from the destructive passions of men, from the corrupting influence of society, and from the transactional nature of the world. It's the ultimate taking back of control. She couldn't control what happened to her in that house when she was 14, but she can control how she lives every day for the rest of her life.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. The physical walls might look similar, but the difference between a prison and a sanctuary is simply the presence of free will. She reclaims her own narrative.
It brings the entire philosophical journey of the text full circle. Carrizales tried to enforce safety and virtue through physical dominance, massive wealth, and architectural engineering, and he failed entirely. Leonora achieved safety and virtue through a free, spiritual choice.
Okay, let's briefly trace the arc of this incredible journey we've been on. We started with a wealthy man returning from the lawless frontier of the Indies, so burdened by the paranoia of losing his fortune that he tried to build a perfectly secure, hermetically sealed fortress against the unpredictable nature of human biology and desire.
And we saw how the harder he tried to suppress the outside world, the more irresistible he made it.
Right, ultimately allowing the chaotic force of music and an idle young bachelor to slip through the smallest crack in his defenses.
We witnessed the collapse of his meticulously engineered system, not by brute external force, but by the internal corruption of the very people he trusted, proving that you cannot build a wall high enough to keep out human frailty.
And finally, we saw the ultimate triumph of a young woman's free will, both in her messy but real resistance in the dark room, and in her final autonomous choice to seek sanctuary on her own terms.
Cervantes' psychological layering in this story is just astounding. He takes a dusty old trope about a jealous husband and turns it into a masterclass on the limits of control, the anatomy of hubris, and the absolute vital necessity of agency in human virtue.
It serves as a timeless reminder that the human soul simply cannot be managed like a financial ledger or secured like gold in a vault.
Couldn't agree more.
So I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. In our modern lives, we constantly build our own digital and emotional fortresses.
Oh, absolutely we do.
Maybe it's not a literal stone mansion with walled-up windows. Maybe it's insisting on using location tracking apps on our partner's phones. Maybe it's demanding to read their text messages or emails to ensure they're faithful. Maybe it's curating our social media feeds and friend circles so tightly that we never encounter a challenging or uncomfortable viewpoint.
We're constantly demanding absolute certainty to avoid the pain of getting hurt.
But ask yourself this: if we successfully engineer a life with absolutely zero risk of betrayal, have we also engineered a life with zero room for genuine love? Are we too just silkworms spinning our own beautiful, suffocating prisons?